Hello everybody, John Weber here, and you probably got a lot of questions right now if you don't follow my Twitter account. So you're wondering, what's he doing here? Why does his footage look a little different than usual? Why is this not a regular episode of The Punchline with the theme music and the annoying text and the talking about comic strips? What's going on here? And I will answer every one of those questions. First off, reason things look a little different than usual, it's because I'm using my backup camera instead of my main camera, which is this. It's a Canon T3i with a Rode microphone, and I love this sucker, but it only records video in about 10 to 12 minute bursts before the sensor overheats and you gotta shut it down for a little while. And I wanted to use my backup camera here, which is the same one I recorded my footage at Anna Marathon with, because that lets you record up to 20 minutes at a time. And the reason I want to do that is because this is just more of sort of a Noah Antweiler spoony style vlog like he does with his movie reviews or with the Counter Monkey series. Because a lot of things have happened to me recently that I just kind of want to talk to you about, and I'm not going to turn this into some sort of soap opera confessional, but I think you'll find it cool, and I promise you it is related to comic strips. So, what am I talking about? Well, first off, and I promise you this is all related, you'll recall that I sort of switched my schedule to once every other week because I went back to grad school to go after my graduate degree, and part of the stuff I was doing there was working as a TV reporter for their news station. And a couple weeks ago, I saw a news article online that said that Tom Batiuk, who is the creator of Funky Winkerbean and Crankshaft, is going to be creating a new third comic strip that's an adventure comic, like the old Flash Gordon comics, like The Phantom, like Prince Valiant. And at the time I was thinking, really? Tom Batiuk's doing that? That doesn't seem like something he would do. He throws some little parodies here and there, but that doesn't really seem like his thing. Now here's the thing, the school that I'm going to, and you'll find it out easily enough if you want to do the research, it's Kent State University. It's about 30 minutes from where I live, and Tom Batiuk is a Kent State alumni. And so I figured, this is a good story. Let's call up Tom Batiuk and see if he wants to talk about his new strip. And I called him up, and I can't believe that I'm actually, when I say it out loud like this sounds kind of weird, but I emailed him saying, "Are you creating this new strip? I thought it could be kind of cool to talk about, to share your Kent State experiences with us, and you know, have this sort of be like one of your big public announcements, and also just be a really cool story for me, both as a reporter and as the comic strip critic." And we played email tag for a little bit, and then he said, "You know what? Just call me." Yeah. At this point I got a little scared because all of a sudden I thought to myself, what if he's seen my video? What if Tom Batiuk has actually seen that Funky Winkerbean video where I said those things about his strip? And I admit I got kind of a little nervous, a little embarrassed, and so the interest of trying to keep things civil and peaceful, that's the reason why some of you noticed I took down my Funky Winkerbean video and my Worst 5 of 2012 video. There's also some journalistic ethics and integrity in play here, and I'll explain that too real quick. I'll try and keep this as unboring as I possibly can. But less than 24 hours after I called him, I was sitting in Tom Batiuk's house in his studio interviewing him. I sat down and I had about a half-hour interview with Tom Batiuk, and I won't lie, guys, it was a great interview because A, I was actually sitting there talking in person to one of the cartoonists whose strip I reviewed. B, his studio is like a treasure trove of museum of comic strip stuff. He's got stacks of Flash Gordon books, like comic collections about this high off the ground, and I know you can't see my floor, but that's about 3.5 feet. I'm really not exaggerating. He's got all sorts of like framed comics originals, like old Tarzan comics from the 40s, old Batman and Robin comics, not the Joel Schumacher movie, but like the old newspaper comics. It was amazing, and we had a really, really good interview, and I don't believe he ever realized or has ever seen my work as the comic strip critic. So no, some people were asking, did Tom Batiuk sue you? Did his lawyers get in contact with you? No. I didn't take the videos down, I just set them to private, and as of time of this video, I'm still debating whether I'm going to put them back up and make them public again. Because honestly now I'm a little embarrassed by them. Because have you ever had someone say something, or you heard something that someone said, like secondhand, or maybe you didn't quite understand what they were saying, And you said, dude, that's horrible. You shouldn't be saying that. Don't say that. And then you talk to them in person and they say, oh, that's not quite what I meant to say. Let me put it to you like this. And then you go, oh, now it makes a bit more sense. That's basically what happened when I was at Batiuk studio. One of the things, I'm not saying that I had a complete 180 flip and I now love Funky Winkerman. I think it's the greatest thing ever. But now I sort of understand what Tom Batiuk is doing and saying better than I did before, because I've actually gotten to talk to him and understand his viewpoint. And I'm hoping that I don't come across as being too wishy-washy now, saying, oh, now that I talked to the guy, I totally love him. It's not me just sort of, fanboying over this. It's just sort of, in the course of this conversation, he sort of, opened a couple doors in my mind and made me look at things a different way. The one thing that he said, and if you're wondering why I'm not showing you any of the interview footage, it's because that would be really, really bad as a journalist. Taking the interview footage that somebody agreed to for one purpose, for that explicit purpose, and then using it in another purpose is all sorts of unethical and maybe illegal. I'm not sure, but it's something that I really don't want to get into. But he told me, over the years, comics used to be like one of the big forms of entertainment, partially because there was no competition. There was no TV, there were no movies, there were no internet, there were no video games, there were none of the other things. That's part of the reason why things like Little Nemo and Flash Gordon were such big deals. And they could be a lot of different things. They could be crazy, they could be surreal, they could be adventurous, they could be dramatic, they could be comedic. But over time, they've sort of changed. They've been pigeonholed into just sort of this one thing, into only being allowed to be comedic. And anything else that tries anything else is sort of shunned and shunted. And he said, that's really kind of sad. Because movies can be anything they want to be. They can be comedic, or they can be tragic, or they can be dramatic, or adventurous, or heartbreaking, or anything. Books can be that. Paintings can be that. Music can be anything they want. But comics have sort of been, stuck down this one little road over time of only being allowed to be comedic, and it's sort of limiting what cartoonists can do. And when he says it like that, it sort of puts that whole thing that I reviewed, where about comics being called comics. It sort of says, now I'm sort of looking at that old storyline and going, okay, I get what you're saying, what you were trying to say during those particular strips with the whole infantilizing by hidebound literalists. I get what you were trying to say. Maybe you could have said it differently than that, because I think that comes across as maybe not the best way to have said it. You know what I'm saying? If you don't understand what I'm saying, please say so in the comments and I'll do my best to explain myself a little further. I'm trying to be as clear as I can. So, with that being said, and I sort of go back at some of my other strips that I've reviewed and I go, is that really how what were they trying to say? Were they trying not necessarily to be funny? Were they trying to be something else? Was the Lockhorns maybe not meant to be entirely 100% funny? Were they meant to be something else? Maybe not in every case. In pretty much every other case, I still look at it and I go, at best, I don't get it, which I think is actually kind of a good standpoint for me to take, is not for me to look at a comic artist and go, you're wrong, you're a terrible person, you shouldn't have said that. Maybe if I go, I don't get what you were doing, that makes more sense. So I guess what I'm saying is that me going and talking to him there, it was sort of a learning experience for me as I'm checking my stopwatch here, it was kind of a learning experience for me as a critic to sort of look at different things and at things in a different light. And I'm hoping that'll make me a better critic overall. Because I am trying to be entertaining, but I'm also trying to be equal parts entertainer and critic. So I don't want one to outweigh the other, because there's a lot of people out there who can be solely entertaining when they're reviewing movies, like Film Brain, like Spoonie, like the Nostalgia Critic, and they all do it so well. But the Nostalgia Critic really shines when he's also a really good critic, in addition to being a good entertainer. His Cat in the Hat review just came out, and oh my gosh, that was amazing. And I'm trying to not get off track here, but my point is, you love him when he's entertaining. but you also love him when he's a good critic. And so I'm trying to find that balance now, and when I'm looking at things in a different light, it sort of causes me to stop and take a look at the things I'm reviewing and go, is this really what I want to say? And I hope this isn't too boring to you, because it was really cool for me to sit down with Tom Batiuk and pick his brain a little bit. Because, you know, I just walked in there as his studio to him as, you know, just some kid wanting to interview him about the book he's coming out with. But I walked in there as a kid and I impressed him because I actually knew what I was talking about with comics. And yeah, like I said, I can't show you the full interview. I can post a link down below to the finished story. I'm going to ask that you be nice. If you're going to post any comments on that website, be nice. Don't be mean. Please, please do not say that I sent you. I'm trying to keep my journalistic side at the TV station and my comic strip critic sides separate. They are two separate things, and this is just one thing where I was able to take my knowledge as the critic and apply it as a journalist. But that's it. I'm still trying to keep them separate. I don't want any trouble at the station. That's basically all that I wanted to say in regards to that. And I got about 9 minutes left before I get a little visual hiccup. So if you see me pause for just a quick moment and then shift, that's what happened. Is I hit that 20-minute limit and I went over. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is much less serious and much cooler, I think, is about a week after I talked to Tom Batiuk, there was a film that was playing at the Cleveland International Film Festival. It was a documentary, and normally I really wouldn't go see a documentary. I don't think there are a ton of people who go out there and they make it, you know, a point to go see as many documentaries as they can. There might be. I could be wrong, I'm not entirely sure. But this one grabbed my attention because it was a documentary about Calvin and Hobbes. How cool is that? It's a whole documentary about all this comic. It's a 90-minute love letter to my favorite comic strip of all time. Just as a fan of Calvin and Hobbes, I would not want to miss that. As the comic strip critic, you bet your butt I'm going to haul my butt down to I forget where it was, Dover, I think, and watch this thing. It's a documentary called Dear Mr. Watterson, and this is my vlog review of Dear Mr. Watterson. I took notes, so I'm not gonna spoil anything because it's gonna come out on DVD, and if you're interested, it's gonna be great. But it was done by a couple guys who grew up around here, I think. I might have that wrong. Oh shoot, I can't remember any of these initials. It's been over a week since I've seen this. But first off, it sort of took a look at not only Bill Watterson's time doing Calvin and Hobbes and a lot of his anti-merchandising status. They talked to everybody. They talked to his syndicators at Andrews McMeel Publishing. They talked to a ton of different cartoonists. They talked to museum curators at cartooning museums. There's one down at OSU, and they had a really good time there just looking at the original drawings of Calvin and Hobbes, the stuff that he actually drew with his own hands, not the copies that were sent off to all the newspapers. And oh my gosh, I was like a little kid in the candy store just watching this thing. But one of the things that I thought was really cool is Stephan Pastis, who does Pearls Before Swine, talked for a little bit, and again, not actually having gotten in contact with Bill Watterson, there was some speculation on Stephan Pastis' part about why Watterson didn't merchandise any of his stuff. And he said, let me see if I can find it in here. Oh shoot, I may not have taken notes on that. Nope, I don't think I did. Well, that got awkward real quick, but I still remember it pretty well. Stephan Pastis said that ultimately it's sort of an issue of control. If you have this strip and you're the only one who's making anything involved in it, then that's solely your thing. You're solely in control of everything that goes on with it. And by merchandising it, by making plushies, by making lunchboxes, by making TV shows and movies and video games and pretty much everything that Garfield's done, you sort of lose your control and your uniqueness of that, because now it's not just your thing anymore, it's also your thing and somebody else's. If you and I own a Hobbes plushie, then it's not just Bill Watterson's Hobbs anymore. There's also a little bit of my own thing there. And so Bill Watterson, Stephen Patz has speculated that maybe Bill Watterson didn't want to give up his control. That maybe it was a little bit of a control freak going on, which is cool. Honestly, I still think that by not merchandising it, it was Calvin and Hobbes retains sort of this mystery and this aura, and almost sort of like a I don't want to say holiness, but sort of a reverence about it. It's like, this is it. This is the only thing that there is in its purest form, which is really something that's really cool. Actually, one of my buddies over at Reviewers Unknown, I still don't know if I should call him BW Media Spotlight or SW Tronics. Please, if you're watching, clarify that for me. Send me a link on Twitter saying that Target has come out with a Hobbs look-alike plushie doll, which on the one hand is really cool, and on the other hand, I don't kind of want to buy it as a Hobbs plushie because I think that goes against the spirit of Calvin and Hobbes. So I appreciate your effort, but if I am going to ever own a Hobbs plushie, I'm just going to make it myself. Thanks for letting me know, though. There was a cool quote partway through Dear Mr. Watterson, which I'm getting back to, and the creators did such an excellent job with it. Oh my gosh, I was super impressed with the whole thing. They had sound effects. They didn't voice Calvin and Hobbes, which I thought was great. You don't want to put a voice to Calvin and Hobbes ever, because everybody comes up with their own unique voice. It's kind of that control thing. You know, I have control over what Calvin and Hobbes look like or sound like in my head, and hearing somebody else do it doesn't sound right. I actually had a project when I was in college where I had my little brother voice Calvin for me, and he did a good job. It still didn't sound like what Calvin should sound like in my head. So, it was one of the museum curators said that comic strips are a unique medium, but for some reason they're considered low, juvenile art by the masses. They can never, just for whatever reason, be considered high art. And she said, that's kind of interesting, because paintings, drawings, images can be high art. You go to a museum, you see paintings, those are high art. You see plays and you see works of literature, and those are also high art. So if you take paintings and you combine them with literature and wordplay, those are comic strips, but for some reason you take those two forms of high art and you combine them, and all of a sudden they simply drop down to low art. Now why is that? And there was never really a definite answer given, but that's actually a really interesting question, which, coupled with Tom Baddock's my talk with Tom Baddock about, you know, comics being allowed to be all these things, it creates sort of an interesting sort of thought to think on. Like, what could comics be if we didn't limit them, if we let them do whatever they want, if they didn't have such tiny little space, if they had this big sort of, as much space to work in as they wanted. They weren't limited to 3 panels in a day and 8 in the Sunday edition. And you know what we get if we give them all that limitation? If we get rid of all those limitations, we get webcomics, honestly. You get stuff that you would never see in spaces that you would never let people use. Oh, this was something cool. If you can find it on YouTube, send it to me, because I would love to see it. There was a group out there. It was a punk polka group. And I know that's a crazy phrase. 18 and a half minutes. Punk polka group. And, oh, where is it? Can I find it here? The Essential. This really is getting like Count a Monkey. Oh, come on, dog. Okay. As I was saying before I got interrupted by the dog and the clock and everything going on, there was a punk polka group that they somehow found online somewhere because it looked like recorded concert footage, and they did a punk polka accordion song of Yukon Ho, of the poem in the front of the Yukon Ho book. If one of you can find that, I wrote the band name down somewhere, and I can't find it now. Where is it? Oh, it was the coolest thing ever, honestly. And they showed all sorts of Calvin and Hobbes fan work. Like, somebody had painted their bedroom wall and the Calvin and Hobbes lined up in a tree. Somebody had made Lego Calvin and Hobbes. There's all sorts of fan work. The guy had a big old Calvin and Hobbes tattoo sleeve on his arm. And I don't really like tattoos, but even I thought that was awesome. Oh, what's the name of the... I can't find the name of the group. But yeah, they talked to all these guys about, you know, how important Bill Watterson's work was and all of his merchandising stuff. And aside from just being really interesting in terms of its information, it was also presented really well, because they would take like a Sunday strip of Calvin and Hobbes. Let me just pull a good one up here. Even these are good, but they're not like the really unique Calvin and Hobbes ones. Those are going to be in this one. Those are going to be in It's a Magical World. Oh yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Where they have like the crazy Calvin and Hobbes layouts here, and I'm going to go out of focus, I'm almost sure, but that you would never see in any other Sunday strip, and they would animate them. I'm not talking about they would make Calvin move, but they would like have it on screen. It was a blank space, and then they drew in the outlines of all the frames, and then they drew in the outlines of all the characters, and then all the color would fill in and fade in, and then all the text balloons would pop, and all the text would fill in, and it would zoom in, and you see like the whole comic strip just grow and come to life. Not with, and then they would add in not dialogue but sound effects. You would hear dinosaurs yelling, or birds screeching, or the bus rolling around, or whatever it was, and it was great. It just got me so immersed in the whole thing. But more than being just like a love letter, look how great Calvin and Hobbes is, look how funny it was. They also touched on some of the other things about Calvin and Hobbes that even I necessarily didn't cover in my review. When I made my review of The Time Machine, they said that Calvin and Hobbes is not just a funny strip, it can also be kind of sad at times. It can also be kind of touching. But those are the things, some of the reasons why we do read it. There's a famous strip, which I think I showed in my video, of Calvin and Hobbes, and they found a dead bird lying somewhere, which I actually don't think I have in any of my books. That Bill Watterson was very afraid of publishing that one because it was such a dark strip for Calvin and Hobbes, but people everywhere loved it, and they said it kind of helped them with their own passing of a loved one that they lost recently. That strip. There's the lead director's, his favorite strip was one that was very sort of melancholy in nature, and they talked about everything around that famous final Calvin and Hobbes strip, which is one of the few comic strips that that is like sort of famous and monumental that I will always remember in my mind. This one here, it's the plain, just mostly white. It's a magical world, Hobbes, old buddy. Let's go exploring. That's one of the few lines from comic strip dumb that people I think everywhere should know, and that is worth remembering. Not I hate Mondays, not I love lasagna. I love lasagna is not even a catchphrase, but if there's one other catchphrase from comics, it's I hate Mondays, and that doesn't say anything really. But it's a magical world, Hobbes, old buddy. Let's go exploring. They spent a good 5 to 10 minutes just going over that final strip and people's reactions to Calvin and Hobbes ending. And yes, I'm basically fanboy gushing all over this thing now. I don't care. My point is, dear Mr. Watterson, if you can find it when it comes out, if it's coming to your local film festival, if you can find it on DVD when it comes out on DVD, and you have any interest in this sort of thing at all, get it. Because it's well worth your money, and I already saw it once, and I'm going to be getting it again. The whole team just really did an astounding job just treating the subject with... It felt like Calvin and Hobbes. It felt like something that should be with Calvin and Hobbes in terms of just how it... I know this is sort of very abstract language, but sort of the way it moved and the way anything was drawn and just sort of the overall feeling of it. The music was done by a group called We Were Pirates, who kind of got their music inspired by the Calvin and Hobbes sort of feel. I ought to buy their music because it sounded Calvin and Hobbes-esque. Like if I didn't use the soundtrack from Up for my credits, I would probably be using that. And the whole thing was just basically anything that anybody ever does on Calvin and Hobbes from now on, that is your measuring stick to judge yourself against. You think, is this something that dear Mr. Watterson already did? Yes. Can I do it better? If your answer is no, put your camera, put your pen, put your whatever it is that you're doing down. I say that knowing that I'm probably going to make another Calvin and Hobbes video at some point, so I'm going to break my own rule there, I guess. But, one other thing that I thought was really interesting about it, and this was a point that they made very clear in a lot of their pre-interview stuff, they didn't try to talk to Bill Watterson. They didn't seek him out. They didn't go knock on his door. They didn't email him asking, "Can we talk to you?" Because that's not what the focus of the thing was, of the film was. It was about why people love Calvin and Hobbes, why a lot of parents nowadays, the first book that they give their children is Calvin and Hobbes. It's how a lot of people get reading. It's how I got interested in plays, because I would read these strips and I would read them aloud, and I would look at it and say, well, how would they be saying this? Would they be saying this in a happy manner, in a confused manner? Well, Calvin looks confused in this panel, and that's kind of how I got started in acting, which in turn is how I got interested in doing the news, which in turn is how I got started doing videos, which in turn is how I got started in a very, very roundabout way, discovering the Angry Video Game Nerd and then the Nostalgia Critic, and now doing the Punchline. So you can pretty much chalk a hugely large portion of who I am back to Calvin and Hobbes, and Dear Mr. Watterson was a perfect representation of why we all love Calvin and Hobbes. So I've gone on now for a lot longer than I planned, gushing about Dear Mr. Watterson. But my final review of that, as rest in peace, Roger Ebert would say, 2 thumbs up, definitely worth watching, in my opinion. It's not going to be a 2-week wait until the next Punchline. Next week I'll be coming out with a new video, the best newspaper comic panel for the 2013 Rubens. So until then, I'm John Weber, your comic strip critic, and that was hopefully more interesting for you than it was for me, and I hope you understand what I'm talking about. If you don't, if you were confused at any point, please ask me down in the comments below, and I will answer to the best of my ability. Take care.